All right, and that kind of leads me into my next topic that I wanted to discuss, which is that you all want to be sure that your thesis is actually completely comprehensive of everything that you're going to be discussing in your argument and kind of creates a map of the points that you'll be covering. So here I've highlighted Luke's thesis. He does a good job with surprising reversal. Good job, Luke, with the counter argument here. And then your position here, I would say this still does need to be attached to some kind of higher order claim like a proposal or something like that. But more importantly, it needs to map out the reasons or points as to why you think positives did occur. So you do a good job going into the counter argument first. Go ahead and omit the links here though, and then after that we get into your points. So first of all, the first reason why you think it was a positive event is because there were lots of scientists called in. I think this probably needs a little bit more explanation, but something along those lines, that there was a lot of help. And then I was a little confused if you were losing focus on that point and maybe blurring that with another point about the tourist industry here. So you may want to separate those. But then after that, you kind of start to structure your paragraphs around the counter arguments. And that's really only something you want to do for that big counter argument that you're using surprising reversal for in your thesis. So I would say instead, focus these paragraphs and your topic sentences within them on what you think those positives are, much more like you're doing here. The research opportunities, that's great. That's a point that needs to go in your thesis. And then this is another one, and then this is another one. So I would say all of these need to be listed in your thesis to make it truly comprehensive. And you're doing that much better in your conclusion. However, you need to do it in your introduction as well for a thesis that's truly comprehensive. And then another one that I saw that was kind of struggling from that same issue was Alexis's. So I'll try to show you here. Let's see. Alexis, you have your thesis kind of broken up between the introduction around this piece of background information, so I would say maybe just move that down here so that it's tied to your thesis more closely and add a transition. But in general, you are presenting your position overall somewhat here, but you're not mapping out the points that you have to support your position. So, you know, you do get to those in your topic sentences a little bit better as to why both religion and science are a good thing and how they should be able to coexist. But let's see. Yeah, it's really not even recapped at the end here. So make sure that you have a solid idea in your head as to what the topic of every single paragraph is going to be, and then take all those points and embed them into your thesis at the beginning of the essay in the same order so that your readers will be able to follow along with your points as you move from paragraph to paragraph. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about your overall, as a class, your execution of the surprising reversal structure. As I said before, most of you are attempting this and then achieving it successfully in varying degrees. So one thing I notice is that several of you are using surprising reversal, but then you're not addressing the counter argument in a paragraph right after the introduction. It might be addressed later somewhere in the paragraph, or it might be addressed in the introduction itself. But the introduction shouldn't be too long because you really want to get right to your thesis. And so while it is appropriate to incorporate some of the controversy surrounding the issue into your introduction, when it comes to that one big counter argument that you're using surprising reversal for, just go ahead and give that its own paragraph right after the introduction. So Rocky, your essay was a good example of this. You know, you almost are refuting the counter argument right here in the introduction itself, and this is not really the point, the place to make your case and defend your argument. This is more of a place to provide background information as to why this is happening. So you do discuss the myth in a paragraph right after the introduction, but I think some of this stuff up here could be moved down into that counter argument paragraph. And then likewise, this was another one that the thesis wasn't truly comprehensive. of the entire argument. And so while you do have good topic sentences, I would say take these and use them to form your thesis itself, so that your thesis says things like, because it doesn't make sense in biological terms, because it isn't supported by evolution, and because we are using more than this for mundane tasks on a daily basis. And then again, after that, you go back into the counter argument, which kind of seems to interrupt your discussion here. It seems to interrupt the flow, excuse me, of your points into your overall conclusion paragraph here. Not your conclusion, but the actual overall argument that you are, well, this is counter argument too. Sorry, I'm not reading this closely enough. So yeah, I would say all this counter argument stuff at the end should be kind of condensed. You don't want the counter arguments to overwhelm your discussion. Kind of reduce those points into just one more manageable paragraph with a few examples. You don't need all of them. And then put that all in this paragraph right after the intro, so that the main body of your discussion is focused on supporting your points. And then this is another one that I would say, you know, maybe you do need to attach this to a higher order claim, a proposal, or at least some kind of evaluation to make all of these points a little bit more relevant and exigent. And then Katie's essay was another one that I think was attempting surprising reversal, but not quite there yet. So let me pull hers up here. Okay, so let's see. I think that the thesis is kind of spread throughout the introduction here, so this is another good example of where you might want to condense it and try to get it into fewer sentences. So maybe could you combine these two sentences using a comma, or in this case a semicolon, or could you condense this transition to something like but or however, just to tie these together a little bit more closely. And then you do a good job mapping out your points here, Katie, but having a full sentence for each one is going to make your thesis really unwieldy. So I would say, can you get these into a more concise list? You don't have to go into detail into each one, just briefly mention it, and then you can talk about it more in these later body paragraphs where you bring each one of them up. But the biggest thing I notice is that your first point is about short and long-term wildlife impacts, and it's spreading as far as the first point is about it spreading as far as the Florida Panhandle, and that is the first point that you go into in the body of your essay. So you're kind of skipping the counter argument paragraph that should come here based on your surprising reversal structure. So if you are going to use surprising reversal like this, like Katie's doing here, make sure you develop that counter argument in a paragraph right after the intro to show that you are really giving it due consideration. And then this is another one that I thought, you know, you have a lot of good points, but there's no overall central claim to tie all of them together. So you're saying it's spread as far as the Florida Panhandle, it's impacted the wildlife in the short and long term, it's impacted these two species specifically and caused their populations to decline. But then as a reader, I'm left thinking, so what? So what should we do based on these problems? Anytime you have an argument that lays out some things that are problems, it's natural for your audience to think, okay, well, what should we do about these problems? Otherwise, it seems like you're just, you know, maybe whining or complaining without a real solution. So if you really want to make an argument that there are problems out there, or that something is an ongoing problem, make sure that you have a solution to offer that will help make your argument more logical, and also help you appear more credible, because you're not just someone who's kind of out there to say what's wrong with everything. You actually have a practical solution to back it up, and then that solution should be developed, well, it should be part of your thesis, but it should be developed in its own paragraph before the conclusion. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I also wanted to touch on the fact that several of you did have good topic sentences, but you didn't necessarily include those topic sentences in the same order as they appeared in your thesis at the beginning of the essay. And let's see. This is another one that was kind of an unwieldy long thesis. David, I would challenge you to try to get this into a few just a couple of sentences and list your points more briefly. Although you do a good job with surprising reversal, you do a good job with your transitions, kind of flipping it back around to your position, and then you do have reasons, 1, 2, 3, and then you do have a proposal, so if anyone is looking for how to tie your points to that overall central claim, David's doing a good job with that here. But then these ideas are not necessarily followed along with in the body of the essay. So this is again why you kind of have to provide the counter argument in a paragraph right after the introduction, because if it's the first thing in your thesis, it should be the first thing in the body of the essay. So I do feel like this is the counter argument paragraph, but right now there's not really a true topic sentence that says so. So I don't think that you should cut out any of this discussion, David, but I think it would help to kind of connect back to the language of how you presented the topic sentence, or excuse me, the point in your thesis, with a stronger topic sentence down here that would kind of clue your reader into the thesis and say, okay, we're talking about this part of the thesis right now, right here in this paragraph. And then likewise, when you get to your later paragraphs, I wasn't really sure that all of them matched up. I think that this seems close to what you're saying in the first point here, right here, okay? And then you do talk about testing afterwards, and then you do talk about this. So in a way, this is actually a good example that people could look to, but a sentence like this isn't really a true topic sentence. Just like I said, the sentence at the beginning of the surprising reversal paragraph isn't really a true topic sentence because it doesn't connect to the central claim, it doesn't transition, but rather it just presents some information. And again, to avoid that kind of more informative structure to your writing, you want to start every topic, or excuse me, every paragraph with a topic sentence that connects to the central claim. So you might say here, you know, yet another reason why new developments should be used to teach more effectively is because it's causing an increase in testing numbers and fall of dropout rates. And that would be enough to add for a topic sentence at the beginning of this paragraph to make it just a little bit more persuasive. And then the other thing I wanted to point out with David's argument is that he does have a proposal in his thesis, as I said, but that proposal does not get developed in a paragraph of its own. And since it's part of your thesis, it is one of your points, it needs to have its own paragraph. It's not enough to just say the proposal again in the solution. So this is another one of the benefits, and then you can see right after that he goes right into his conclusion. So I would say you need to add a paragraph here that says, here's what should be done, and then you can develop your proposal with things like how it's going to be implemented, is it really feasible, there's bound to be some counter arguments there in terms of how much it's going to cost and things like that. So that would be an additional paragraph or even a whole section that you would need to include before the conclusion here. And then just the very last thing I'll touch on is kind of technical. You do want to avoid any first or second person voice. I noticed a lot of you saying things like we and our, my. That's just not conventional when writing a formal academic essay for an academic audience. You want to try to rework everything into third person. But luckily that's something that you can do in your revisions. But even more than that, you don't want to use any personal examples. All of your evidence has to come from those peer-reviewed scholarly sources. And if you're talking about your own everyday lives, that's really going to undermine your credibility with the audience. So it's not about you, okay? Everything, all the information needs to come from your sources. I also saw a lot of I believe in your theses, and that again kind of undermines the strength of your points. And luckily with those I believe statements, it's oftentimes very easy to just go cut them out altogether, and it doesn't take or hurt the grammar of your sentence to just take them out. But even a bigger issue is not using any of your actual experiences like Chris is doing here. So Chris, you need to focus these points and this information just on what you found in your scholarly sources. Okay, so I think I've said something about pretty much everyone's essay. If I didn't talk about yours, I truly apologize. Let me know. Notice that Jessica's and Alexis's Essays have already been called by someone, or excuse me, Nikki's, Jessica Peck, Nikki. So please do not review either one of these essays. They're already being reviewed by someone else. I think Alexis is doing Nikki's and Rocky is doing Alexis's. So just choose one that hasn't gotten feedback yet from anyone else, and I'll look forward to your revisions next week. Thank you.